And we're live. It is, and I'm just realizing these are the first words I've spoken this morning. So if my voice sounds a little bit like I haven't, been doing vocal exercises, ya da 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 da, that's because I haven't. It is Friday, November 22nd, 2024, the year of our Lord, 8 o'clock a.m. 7 o'clock a.m. for Joel Woodward in Minneapolis. And you are watching a fucking revolution in morning television. Dog Shirt DV, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, it's going to be a great fucking day. And yesterday, I made my first ever Get Ready With Me video. We did it in one take. I have never watched a Get Ready With Me video, so Catherine Pompilio, the very estimable Catherine Pompilio, kind of talked me through what the elements of it were. She said it should start with a "Hey guys," and that you just kind of weave the substance into it. And we decided to film it in the Oval Office, so we went over to the White House and borrowed the Oval Office from Joe Biden, and she filmed it and I recorded it, and then she added a bunch of effects and we loosed it on the world. And I am pleased to say that the reception has been good. People, for some reason, don't seem to think it is undignified for a Brookings Senior Fellow to do Get Ready With Me videos. People seem to be taking it in good humor. And so I think we're going to be doing more of these. I got some feedback that I should do less makeup tutorial and more just kind of leaning into doing the makeup while talking about the substance of issues. I got some feedback that I'm not good at eyeshadow, which is true, by the way. But the Ukrainians like the blue and yellow eyeshadow. And so on the whole, I'm pretty pleased with this experiment. I woke up this morning to find a scurrilous attack on me in the New York Times by the estimable Sam Moyn. I have invited Professor Moyn to join Dog Shirt TV this morning so that, we can flay each other's flesh with iron combs. And we will see if he has the stones to show up. No, I'm joking. Sam and I are friends, and it was not a scurrilous attack. It was an interesting argument. Don't know if Sam's free, but he may stop by to discuss the article. Hey, we're not allowed to have fun anymore. So we got to find creative ways to have fun. And that's what we're going to do. All right. Looks like I don't yet have any co-hosts this morning. We still have not gone a day where nobody shows up and I just have to talk for an hour. And I do confess that I'm a little bit afraid of that day whenever it should come. Eventually, it's going to come. And, I have just talked for 4 minutes straight, and it's not like I'm running out of things to say, but I'm not actually sure how I would do a full hour of this. I guess we might find out today. But, if people in the audience have thoughts they want to bring up, jump on in and do it. If any of my co-hosts decide this is a great time to show up, I would not discourage that. And Sam Moyn, if you want to come on here and have a WWE smackdown about legalization and, bring it on, dude, because I can't do the kayfabe stuff. All right, let's talk about Matt Gaetz because that is where it's starting today. We're going to talk about Matt Gaetz. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pam Bondi, about whom I don't know a great deal, save that, she had that weird financial entanglement with Donald Trump in the form of $25,000, and then she didn't bring a lawsuit that she was considering bringing against Trump University, and she stole a dog. What is it with these people and dogs? There's something weird going on there. She stole a dog, and I think if I remember right, she once asked the governor to postpone an execution so that she could attend a fundraiser, which seems like a like not best practices. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Pam Bondi in a moment, but let's talk about Matt Gaetz. Getting rid of Matt Gaetz is a win. I do not believe for a second that Trump was playing four-dimensional chess or three-dimensional chess or two-dimensional chess. Chess is really a two-dimensional game, even though the pieces are three dimensions. The board is two, and you can play it entirely in two dimensions. So, two-dimensional game. Don't think he was playing 3, 4, or 8-dimensional chess with this. I think he wanted to get Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. Matt Gaetz becomes Attorney General. That's a fuck you to the establishment, both the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment. It's a fuck you to the bureaucracy of the Justice Department, and it has certain very significant, let's just say, tactical benefits in terms of going after the bureaucracy and going after political enemies. Now, how aggressively he would want to use that or would be able to use that, different question. But a prerequisite for that is having somebody in the office who's willing to do it and capable of doing it. And so I think he actually wanted to get Matt Gaetz in the office, and Matt Gaetz is not going to be in the office. And hey, that is the first real win since Trump was elected again. And I don't want to diminish that. Now, how big a win it is a question. And it's a question that hinges on a couple of other questions. One is who replaces Gaetz, and we now know the answer to that. It's Pam Bondi. We're going to discuss her in a minute. The second, though, is this a one-off thing? Is it, every presidential administration has a single cabinet member that they lose in the context of the Senate confirmation process, the sacrificial victim. Matt Gaetz is the, burnt offering for this administration. And so he will, turn into a pumpkin and become an important lobbyist and Fox News presence. And then somebody else will get it. And RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth will sail to confirmation, the Senate having drawn its ritual pound of flesh. If that's what happens, then it is a very small win. On the other hand, we did learn yesterday that Matt Gaetz lost because 4 Republican senators were, as the New York Times reported, implacably opposed to him. Let's call them, as I did in my column yesterday, the implacable 4. And the implacable 4 were Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Mitch McConnell, interesting, and the new senator from Utah, whose name is eluding me for the moment. And now, if this group of people, yes, thank you, John, it is John Curtis. If this group of people is implacably opposed to Matt Gaetz because, say, Matt Gaetz is a perfectly obnoxious individual who happens to have slept with a 17-year-old whom he paid and done a bunch of drugs and, attacked a lot of senators, then this is a win of very modest proportions. What it means is it's fine to be a super Trump loyalist. It's fine to be unqualified. It's fine to be a partisan fanatic. It is not fine to be an asshole to your colleagues, to take out Republican leadership. And if you do that sort of thing, well, then you might have trouble getting confirmed. Conversely, if what is showing here is the emergence of, let's say, a coalition of the vertebrates, 4 members at a base, enough to take down a nominee when combined with Democrats, and that coalition is willing to stand for certain things like that vaccines are important, that qualifications are important, that not raping people is important. Well, that is a pretty interesting development. And I don't want to say that's what happened, because it's way too early to say that. But I do want to say that what happened is consistent with that. 1 point is a fluke, 2 points defines a line, 3 points is a trend, 4 points takes out the 4 most objectionable nominees of the administration. And so this is an interesting thing to watch. How does this group of people respond to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? And remember that Mitch McConnell is, among other things, a polio survivor. He believes in vaccines. He has reason to believe in vaccines. I don't want to make a prediction here because predictions are for fools. I will say that this is a positive development of unknown magnitude and significance. And this is the necessary first step for any further positive developments. It is not by itself that important, except in the very limited sense that Matt Gaetz is not going to run the Justice Department, and that's good. But it is a positive development, and we should recognize it as such, which brings us to the person that will replace Matt Gaetz, either as sacrificial lamb and burnt offering or as the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi. As I said, I do not know very much about her, save for the 3 things I mentioned earlier: $25,000, apparently in exchange for not suing Donald Trump, postponing an execution, seeking postponement of an execution to attend a fundraiser, bad luck, and stealing a dog. I'm going to refrain from the meditation that I feel like having about why it is that so many Trump cabinet members seem to have animal cruelty issues. I mean, you got the bear in Central Park, you got Kristi Noem shooting a dog, you got, I mean, it seems like more than random, people who dismember, kill, or do weird things with animals. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, you could spin out all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to do it. just flagging it. I am watching the other cabinet nominees for like who's, eaten a squirrel or live, or who may have had sex with a goat. I just, there's something going on here with animals that I really want to um I want to understand better, but I don't have anything to say about. Um, I'm going to reserve judgment on Pam Bondi, not because I think there is any scenario in which the judgment is positive, but because there are a lot of bad options to run the Justice Department. Um, and there are people whom I'm afraid of more than she is. She seems like an apparatchik. And, there's some point at which you say the department can survive this. I don't think the department in its current form could survive Matt Gaetz. Have a question, honestly, about whether it can survive Pam Bondi. And so I want to see how she answers questions. Um, uh, I want to see what kind of commitments she makes. I want to see what her record is on statements with respect to, politicization, weaponization. I would feel very differently about her if she were to turn out to have a lot of statements like Matt Gaetz does about bringing the department to heel, and about uh, fictional weaponizations of the past and truthful weaponizations or aspirational weaponizations of the future, than if she's, had a history of saying the right things. I actually think saying the right things kind of matters. Um, uh, so yeah, I mean, I am not going to say anything in her defense. I am going to say that a good general practice, when you don't know the details of who somebody is as a nominee, is to wait and let the record develop. And particularly given some of the alternatives who Trump was reportedly thinking about, people like Mike Davis and people like Jeffrey Clark and people like Eileen Cannon, who, those are just obviously unacceptable nominees. I do think the question of whether Pam Bondi meets some minimal threshold of acceptability is one that is worth keeping an open mind about. So, all of which is not to say that I'm not going to come out full-throatedly against her a week or two from now, but I'm not going to do it right now. I would say she is an apparatchik, a Trumpist apparatchik of a type that I am highly predisposed to oppose. But she does have some law enforcement experience. She was a prosecutor, an elected prosecutor in Hillsborough County for a while. She was the elected Attorney General of Florida, in a role in which, by the way, she did not shroud herself in glory. So she is sort of minimally qualified for the position, and qualified in a formal sense. And so let's see how the record develops, and we will take it from there. It is now 20 minutes past the hour. Sam Moyne hasn't shown up. I guess he's just not up to debating me. None of my co-hosts have shown up. Nobody from the audience has broken in with a brilliant thing to vamp off of. And so we are going to turn to the next item of the news that is on my mind. And that is the question of the wind down of the Trump trials. There's been a lot of discussion of how it's going to be done. Everybody keeps seeming to push it off. Jack Smith guarding, he has pushed things off, asked for a brief delay on this. Justice Merchan playing the cards close to the vest for another, has the is entertaining a briefing of dismissal of the whole case. Not clear what's going on in Georgia yet, although the case will clearly go into some kind of deep freeze. How should we think about this? So I want to suggest that it really doesn't matter all that much. And there are a number of different ways these things could wind down. I do agree with Roger Parloff that the ideal resolution of New York would be to go forward with sentencing and then defer everything until the end of the administration. But I do want everybody to understand that we are not going to, there is no scenario in which Trump's presidency is meaningfully encumbered by the existence of these cases. And by the way, it shouldn't be. And I want to say that very clearly. A guy with 4 criminal cases against him pending ran for president and won. The public is entitled to elect a president. And when you elect a president, you are not electing a set of criminal cases. You are electing a president who has to be able to act as president. And so, the proposition that Donald Trump should be able to take office without dragging along with him all the baggage, except the political baggage, of course, which he does bring in. But there's just no question in my mind that the electoral process trumps, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, the criminal process. That, if you are, now it might be different in my mind if, the public was not aware of these cases, but the public is very aware of these cases and knowingly voted for the man despite them. So I think in the end, in a democracy, you have to defer to that. And it's a little different in a parliamentary democracy where you could say, well, the ruling party can ditch its leader and choose a different leader. They didn't vote for the man, right? They voted for the, Finnish Social Democratic Party or the Italian neo-fascist party. And so the relevant titular head of the party is merely there by the grace of the party majority, and the party can choose a different leader. That's not our system. Our system involves the direct election of a person. And that person has to be allowed to be president, even if, I voted for the other woman, even if I warned over and over again that this person was a threat to democracy. So I think the cases, one way or another, A, will go away, B, should go away, at least go away as to Trump and as to the period in which he is in office. And the manner in which they do so matters, but it doesn't matter all that much. Antti Ruokonen, speaking of the Finns, we refer to Finland and up you pop. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, I wanted to share with you a little interesting and slightly amusing tidbit that there was a citizen initiative brought before, or rather initiated, that has the potential to end up in some sort of parliamentary handling, which is the suggested disbandment of the True Finns party.
Really? What authority does the government have to So for those who have not seen Antti and my previous discussions of this, the True Finns are the kind of far right authoritarian populist party of Finland. They had a moment of they did rather well electorally a few years ago, and they've been in some turmoil ever since. What authority does a popular initiative have to disband a political party in the Finnish system?
Well, there's actually been the possibility to do such an initiative has been around, I believe, since 2015. And there's been some 80 of such initiatives taken, and it has a 50,000 sign up threshold to be brought before parliamentary handling. And there's been 7 of these initiatives so far that have it's always or mainly to propose legislation, and 7 of them have ended up actually being passed as laws in one form or another.
So those are kind of like our version of ballot initiatives,
Yeah.
referenda kind of things. But I would think there would be some, to what authority does even the Finnish parliament have to disband a lawful political party? Are they alleged to have done something wrong or merely been a kind of repugnant Trumpy force
Well,
politically?
I suppose both those things are true because there was I read the brief that was attached to the initiative, and it basically said that the party had engaged in all sorts of anti-democratic, anti-society ventures that put all together signifies that it's actually a threat to the good order and discipline and the working Finnish democracy, so that the party should be disbanded. But I mean, currently, I just want to say that currently the True Finns party is actually a member of the coalition government, and
Right.
their leader is the secretary, the treasury secretary, which is basically the second most powerful position in the government. So it's I would say that it's quite unlikely that even if the 50,000 sign up threshold is reached, that actually that there's a law that would ban the True Finns party.
And what has their behavior in government been like? So they are now part of the government in a fashion that is, they're not the ruling party, but they are like a 20%, 15-20% of the parliament?
Well, I mean, mostly since they are in government and they hold a number of secretary positions, it could be said that some of the persons who occupy those positions are not used to being in such positions of authority and influence. As well, sometimes they don't communicate in the way that they should, but given the fact that you would assume that there could be quite wide a range of unwise commentary emanating from these persons. It's actually been relatively normal, the functioning, because of course in the Finnish system the elected officials are only like a small part of the government agencies. So the normal
Right.
running, yeah.
And and I take it their coalition partners would not be receptive to banning them in the middle of a coalition.
Yeah, I would say that Prime Minister Orpo would probably have some thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so of course we had an analog to that in last year and earlier this year, which was the question of Trump's disqualification under the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court unanimously said no, rightly or wrongly. And so, it's an interesting example of the fact that in every country where this happens, there is some whether you call it fantasy or idea that there is a legal deus ex machina that's going to save us politically from the problem. And
Yeah.
of course, there isn't in any society. And I would say the one that has been most aggressive about that proposition was Turkey, where they, spent years banning the the sort of neo-Islamist parties, first of Erbakan and then of the current Turkish president Erdogan, was a kind of outgrowth of the efforts to ban previous sort of similarly ideologically inclined parties. And eventually they formulated a party that was and there were eventually formulated a party that was capable of operating within the system. It took over the system and it reformed the system, that's a gentle word for it, to its own liking. And so I am skeptical, honestly, not of the sort of legal integrity of these things. I do think as a legal matter, it's very hard to argue that Donald Trump should not be disqualified as president based on the text of the 14th Amendment. But I am very skeptical of the effectiveness of these schemes, because it seems to me that it's a little bit like, telling 13-year-olds that they must not do marijuana. It just makes it more attractive. It just makes it seem like the denied special pleasure, and it it creates a kind of martyrdom feature that is ends up being politically much more powerful than the short-term gain that you get. And Erdogan has run Turkey in an increasingly authoritarian fashion now for 20 years. The efforts to ban the party of his predecessor seem a little bit silly in retrospect. And a similar thing has happened in Israel. The Israeli Supreme Court banned Meir Kahane from running because his Kach party was not democratic and racist. And now Meir Kahane was assassinated, but one of his disciples, who is no less undemocratic and no less racist, is has 12 or 13 seats in the Knesset and is a part of the coalition in Netanyahu's government, on whom Netanyahu is very dependent. And I actually struggle to identify an example of a banning of political parties that are actually have real constituencies, where that ends up being an effective way in functioning democracies over time to manage the threat that they pose. And I'm not enough of a comparative political scientist to say that there aren't examples of that. I suspect there may be, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. And I think the really important thing in the long run is to some combination of taking the politically powerful issues from them and absorbing them into, in the case of hard right movements, mainstream conservative parties. In other words, co-opting their issues. In the case of left movements, co-opting popular parts of their program by social democratic parties or by liberal parties, diffusing and ridiculing the personalities who run them. I think one of the mechanisms that really helped in the Berlusconi case was his becoming ridiculous. And one of the things that concerns me about Trump is that he becomes ridiculous and it doesn't matter, which I think is I have never known what to make of that. Why the self-beclowning does not have more effect than it does, but that's a concern of mine with Trump. The long-term management of these political movements strikes me as a very something that you cannot solve with the quick ban. And so, and then in a European context, this operates differently in a European parliamentary context than in an American context, but folding them and burying them inside of coalitions is also important. So the European way of doing that is what Finland is doing, right? A mainstream conservative party, lops off the true Finns and says, okay, you're part of our government now, you got to behave, right? And that, to some extent, they, over time, come to behave differently. They do embarrassing things, they communicate in ways, and they, do some obnoxious policy, of course, but they get buried under this larger coalition. The American system is different because it's a two-party system, and so what we have is extremes in both parties that get ironed out in the votes. And so you have the Rashida Tlaibs in the Democratic Party, you have in the traditional Republican Party, you have, you have the Bob Dornans in a party run by, very mainstream, sensible conservatives. It's all part of one party, but at the end of the day, the only power is to be a vote in a coalition. Now, that has really broken down in the Republican Party because the inmates have taken over the asylum. But the idea that you bury the extremists in the size of the party is still the way you handle, one way or another, is an important, if you don't want fascists to develop a party apparatus of their own that competes, there is a role for subsuming them in much larger party institutions.
Yeah. But in a Finnish context, it was interesting that over the summer, just after the coalition government had formed, there was this sort of brouhaha because the newly minted Treasury Secretary of the True Finns was actually, it wasn't that she was articulating the fact that, okay, that we need to make serious government spending economies, we need to cut spending, we need to dig into the social programs and what have you. But it was the way she did it. It was the way she did it that made it seem that she was almost gleefully, because there was actually material of her like metaphorically using scissors and being really happy about it. Which usually when there is a serious government action to cut spending and dig into these sort of things that actually have real impact in people's lives, you do it in a sort of irreverent way of regretful, like we're really truly sorry we have to do this, but we really need to. Not okay, now we have these giant scissors and we're just gonna cut and be really happy about it.
And what and you know when the glee at that sort of thing, whom does it appeal to? Who are the constituencies in Finland who are excited about budget cuts? I had always thought, Finland is one of those societies that is careful enough about how it distributes benefits such that there really aren't significant parts of the community that are not benefiting from the social fabric that it's set up. And so who are the people who are discontented at the arrangement of spending?
Well, that's really the confounding thing, because the policies that were like coming out of what was beneath all the cuts being made, there was an obvious need to tackle government spending. Don't get me wrong, but there was also this idea that because the National Coalition Party is generally speaking viewed as
and for those who are not conversant in Finnish politics,
that's the conservative.
So this is the mainstream
right-wing conservative party. Yeah.
And loosely speaking, a Finnish conservative is kind of like a mainstream Democrat. Is that fair?
I think in the current situation, I would say that.
I mean, I think of a Finnish conservative as how different is a Finnish conservative from Joe Biden?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is only my personal view, and I'm not analyst of Finnish politics, but I could get behind that. Yeah.
Okay, so you were saying I interrupted you for the Finland 101. Go back to your point.
Yeah. So basically, the true Finns, as their party head being the treasury secretary, they were basically implementing policies that were straight out of the textbook of the National Coalition Party, which is strange to begin with, because they basically campaigned as the party of the poor and the downtrodden, and now they were actually making poor people more poor and more downtrodden. So I think there is probably the constituents that they were actually pleasing was that there was probably a sentiment among their rural voters that they were basically tightening the belt in ways that would be felt most in the bigger cities. And,
so that's really interesting, because I think the urban-rural divide is, there's obviously not in Finland, but here there's a significant racial component to that. But I think if you look at populist movements around the world, the democratic world, there really is a resentment of cities, is a major component of it everywhere. And Anne Applebaum has talked about this with respect to Law and Justice in Poland, that really a lot of what they are most exercised about is urban elites and people who benefit from globalization. And I think that is definitely true of the Trump movement, that the consistent feature is that the further away you are from the center of a city, the more Trumpy the electorate looks. And, there are various ways to measure that. Do you live closer to a Walmart um, than a Whole Foods, right? There's a million iterations of this, but the urban rural split is just a real thing that's driving this worldwide, I think.
Yeah. Could I have one more point before?
By all means.
Yeah. So earlier, when you mentioned the banning of political parties, that you were skeptical of the effect that would have, and I have an interesting parallel in Finland, because in the early 1930s, the Finnish Communist Party was actually banned by law, and there was considerable right-wing and far-right pressure for that to occur in the first place. There was actually the threat of actual mutiny at that time. But the thing is that the one reason why that actually somehow was maybe not as consequential or even successful in a way, that there was really no like fifth column during World War II in Finland that made any sort of hassle in the Finnish hinterland, was that actually the Finnish society had mended itself and come together due to the social policies that were enacted in the 20s and 30s after the Civil War. So by the Second World War hit, the society was like, it was pulling together in common goals, in a common direction. So when one extreme party was banned, that might have had some like utilitarian value to a certain extent, but I mean, the far right was marginalized almost at the same time, because there was a failed rebellion attempt. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't say that there is no role for banning parties. I don't. Democracy is not that simple. That iron laws are. I do think the history of the attempt, when you're dealing with movements that are essentially political and not violent in character, even when they're quite noxious, is not a happy one.
Yeah.
And it's not one that generally involves the successful suppression of the noxious ideas in the long run, though it can have certain short-term benefits. I don't want to. I'm not a comparativist political scientist, and I don't want to pretend to know more about this across societies than I do. My impression is it generally doesn't work, and that the problem of managing ideas is a problem that in the long run you have to manage by political means. And I am going to sneeze now, so pardon me while I mute myself. Antti, Eve, the floor is yours.
Thanks.
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah. What time is it in Finland? And what time is it in Finland? And where are you exactly? Are you in Helsinki?
No, I'm in a smaller city called Vaasa. It's on the western coast, and the time is 15:49.
15:49.
And there is snow.
Yeah, there's snow. Yeah, there was a actual, honest to God, snowstorm last couple of days.
Which is a fun thing or not?
I mean, sure. I mean, I did really enjoy, the giant snowflakes slowly descending on the ground. It was very romantic and picturesque. But when I had to drive by with a car, it was, maybe not so romantic.
So, Ev, has Vaasa, Finland beaten Quebec to snow this year?
Yes. As did Oxford, Paris. Yeah, like definitely we're on. I'm not sure we're late though, but we haven't had snow yet.
And Antti, are you guys early, or is this a normal time for you to have first snow?
Well, I mean, usually, I mean, in Lapland, first snow fell like ages
Of
ago
course.
already. But I mean, this is actually these days. It's still a bit late because the autumn was unseasonably uh, warm actually. So yeah, climate change. Go figure.
Yeah, it's almost like it's real.
Almost like yeah.
Yeah. So Ev, what's on your mind this morning?
Currently, the big thing on my mind at the moment is how to like change my password to log on all sorts of internets and emails, because like some people, some organizations have not figured it out yet that you don't have to ask people to change their password every 6 word, and it's actually a security flaw to ask people to do it. And like NIST no
Okay.
longer recommends it.
So cybersecurity 101 for people, Ev, why is changing your password regularly not good practice?
I'm not sure I know exactly, but like you end up writing it up everywhere. You end up losing it. You end up, and
Using
so
weaker passwords so that you'll
Yeah.
remember them, rather than having one good password stored in a vault that, Chrome remembers for you, and you don't have to remember yourself. You do once every 3 months, you make up something that you're going to remember for the next 3 months, and then the Chinese hack your brain and get your password.
yeah,
So
and actually, yeah, and not only like you reflexively start picking up weaker passwords, but actually the guidelines. The system is so archaic that like the guideline forces you to have a short password with like it's
wait,
yeah.
so John Hawkinson is disagreeing with me about this, and he knows more cybersecurity than I do. So, John, come on and explain to us why forced regular password changes uh, are not bad the way I think they are, and are they, in fact, is Ev's home institution correct to be torturing her right now? Okay, so John will show up or not. I just want the record to reflect that. Oh, here he is. Um,
Good morning, Ben.
Good
So
morning.
I disagree with your reasoning, but I do agree with your premise. That is to say, forced password changes are bad, but not for the reasons you articulated.
Okay, so first of all, what's wrong with my reasoning? And secondly, why am I right for the wrong reasons?
So your reasoning was forced password changes force you to memorize them instead of using a single master password. And the correct answer over the past 5 to 10 years is everyone should be using a password manager, whether it's in your browser or a separate tool like 1Password or LastPass. And when you use those tools, you don't have to worry about remembering the password. And in fact, counterintuitively, forcing you to change your password kind of encourages you to use those tools. It's not a good reason to force you to change your password, but those tools are generally considered to be good tools because they encourage you to use different passwords for different websites, a problem that a lot of people have. People tend not to do that unless they have a good tool that lets them track passwords, and it also allows them to use complicated passwords that are more secure because they're harder to remember.
Okay, so you've just made a very good case for torturing Ev by having her password.
No.
Disagree.
So
Hard disagree. No. You made a really good case for my home institution to force me to like have a password manager, which is not what it's doing now.
Okay, but
like
so
if you're into forcing me to do something, force me to do the right thing.
Agreed. So the question really is why are forced password changes bad? And it's really more that they're not good. There was a belief at one time that they promoted security, but what they actually do is they piss people off they require them
Ev
to.
looks pissed off this morning.
Definitely.
Yeah, they require. They sometimes can encourage people to write them down, but I think in the modern world with password managers, that's not really a sin you can ascribe to them anymore. Although apparently there are people who don't use password managers, so maybe that's true. I think that another problem. Well, there is also a set of arguments that say it's actually not a good idea for you to learn to type your password, because if you type your password, you can be fooled by a website that replaces a letter L with a 1, for instance. You think you're going to the right website, you think it's legitimate, so you type in your password and you get fooled by something that's super close. A password manager will never be fooled in that way. It will always be able to say, this is not the right website. Now, of course, you can override that and thus create the same risks when you say, oh yeah, this is really my bank. Send my bank's password. You can override it and tell it you know better and then screw yourself. But as long as you don't do that, the password manager is actually more secure than the person with the perfect memory.
All right. I just want to say that I agree with everything John just said, with the following caveat, which is it is not enough to have a password manager. You have to have a password manager that interfaces seamlessly with the software that is demanding that you change your password. And this is where a lot of people, including me, by the way, get very frustrated, because though I have a good password manager, the system that one of my vendors uses does not interface well with it. And so when it comes time to change my password, it is a pain in the ass. And it's not simply a matter of going into the password manager and saying, change this password to something else that's random. You have to do it manually. And anything that you have to do manually, there is going to be a temptation instead to say password 1234 $, with one of the words in password be a capital, letters be capital. And then every dictionary program in China and Russia is going to say, ha ha, we got the motherfucker. And that is exactly what Ev is going through right now. And so I just want to ask both John and Antti what password Ev should use now. I think that's the subject. I'm going to give the following recommendation, Ev, that you use inanities with a capital I at the beginning.
Nope.
And
Nope.
a $sign instead of the S.
Doesn't work.
John, what password do you think Ev should use?
I refer Ev to XKCD 936, but I'll say my choice is actually a little different. I pick 2 random words followed by the last 2 digits of the seconds of time, which I place between them, and I use that to select a password when I need a password I'm able to type, like if I want to store it in my phone and on my computer and I don't want to use a networked password manager. So my suggestion is pick 2 random words from the dictionary, either using automated tools or old school, pull it out and stick your finger on a page, and then pick a number and put those together, and that's my choice.
Antti?
I think you should watch through an old TV series called Due South, which has an appropriate Canadian theme, and use random song lyrics from their soundtrack, because they have a quite nice soundtrack.
Ev, how are you going to pick a password? Give us the exquisite details so that the Chinese intelligence and Russian intelligence will not have to waste a lot of time hacking you.
Well, none of these tips will work because the guideline, none of them follow the guidelines. So I think I'll end up just like trying randomly everything that comes to my mind until one finally works, and I won't remember what I type. So
that's the way to go.
Wait, tell us what the guidelines are.
4 letters, 1 sign, that can't be an exclamation mark, a dash.
My tip for that is add a period at the end. That's your easy punctuation rule.
Yeah,
Okay.
and use only letters out of a dictionary so that the Chinese will have a you don't want to make this hard for people to hack you, Ev. We are going to leave it there. This has been a delight. The first ever Dog Shirt Daily that was 100% improvisational, like literally had no idea who was going to show up. Thanks to John, Antti, and Ev. And folks, we will see you on Monday. Keep the faith.